Guys, we're going to go over something that it really needs to be taught in schools. It might have been at one time. So much gets left out for political reasons. Faith is not believing God can, but knowing God will. Now, the real reason Thomas Jefferson owned a copy of the Quran, a 232-year history of our fight against Islam and why it's no longer taught in our public schools. When Jefferson saw that there was no negotiating with Muslims, he formed what is now called the Marines, sea-going soldiers. These Marines were attached to U.S. merchant vessels. When the Muslims attacked U.S. merchant vessels, they were repulsed by armed soldiers, but there's more. The Marines followed the Muslims back to their villages and killed every man, woman, and children in the village. It didn't take long for the Muslims to learn and to leave the U.S. merchant vessels alone. English and French merchant vessels started running up our flag when they entered the Mediterranean to secure safe travel. That's why the Marine hymn contains the verse, "To the shores of Tripoli." This is very interesting and a must-read for our history. It points out where we may be heading. Most Americans are unaware that the fact that over 200 years ago the United States had declared war on Islam and Thomas Jefferson led the charge. But at the height of the 18th century, Muslim pirates, the Barbary pirates, were the terror of the Mediterranean and a large area of the North Atlantic. They attacked every ship in sight, held the crews for an exorbitant ransom. Those taken hostage were subject to barbaric treatment and wrote heartbreaking letters home begging their government and families to pay whatever the Mohammedan captors demanded. These extortionists of the high seas represented the North Atlantic Islamic nation of Tripoli, Tunis, Morocco, and Algiers, collectively referred to as the Barbary Coast, and it presented a dangerous and unprovoked threat to the new American Republic. Before the Revolutionary War, U.S. merchant ships had been under the protection of Great Britain. When the U.S. declared its independence and entered into the war, the ships of the United States were protected by France. However, once the war was won, America had to protect its own fleet. Thus, the birth of the U.S. Navy, beginning in 1874, 17 years before he would become president. Thomas Jefferson became the American minister to France. The same year, the U.S. Congress sought to appease its Muslim adversaries by following the footsteps of European nations who paid bribes to the Barbary state rather than engage them in war. In July 1785, Algerian pirates captured American ships, and the Dey of Algiers, the big head concho, demanded an unheard ransom of $60,000. It was plain and simple. Case of extortion, Thomas Jefferson was opposed to any further payment. Instead, he proposed to Congress the formation of a coalition of allied nations who would come together to force the Islamic State into peace. A disinterested Congress decided to pay the ransom. In 1786, Thomason and John Adams met with the Tripoli ambassador to Great Britain to ask what right his nation attacked American ships and enslaved American citizens, and why Muslims held so much hostility towards Americans, a nation which they had no previous contact with. The two future presidents departed and reported that Ambassador Sid Ali somebody had answered that Islam was founded by the laws of their prophet, that it was written in the Quran that all nations who would not acknowledge their authorities were sinners, and it was their right and duty to make war upon them wherever they could be found, and to make slaves of all that they could take as prisoners, and that every Muslim man should every Muslim who should be slain in battle was sure to go to paradise. Despite the stunning admission of premeditated violence on non-Muslim nations, as well as the objections of many notable American leaders, including George Washington, who warned that caving in was both wrong, it would only further embroil the enemy for the next 15 years, that the American government paid the Muslims millions of dollars for the safe passage of American ships or the return of American hostages. The payments in ransom and tribute amount to over 20% of the United States government annual revenues in 1800. Jefferson was disgusted. Shortly after him being sworn in as the third president of the United States in 1801, the Pasha of Tripoli sent him a note demanding the immediate payment of $225,000 plus $25,000 a year for every year forthcoming. That changed everything. Jefferson let the Pasha know that on certain terms that he could do what he could do with his demand. The Pasha responded by cutting down the flagpole at the American consulate and declared war on the United States. Tunis, Morocco, Algiers immediately followed suit. Jefferson until now had been against American raising a naval force for anything beyond coastal defense, but having watched his nation being cowered down by Islamic thuggery for long enough, he decided it was finally time to meet force with force. He dispatched a squadron of frigates to the Mediterranean and taught the Muslim nation of the Barbary Coast a lesson he hoped they would never forget. Congress authorized Jefferson to empower U.S. ships to seize all vessels and goods of the Pasha of Tripoli and to cause to be done to all other acts of precaution as hostility as a state of war would justify. When Algiers and Tunis, who were both accustomed to American cowardice and saw the newly independent United States had both the will and the right to strike back, they quickly abandoned their allegiance to Tripoli. The war with Tripoli lasted for 4 more years and raged up until 1850. The bravery of the United States Marine Corps in these wars led to the line in the shores of Tripoli in the Marine hymn, and it would be ever known as Leathernecks for the leather collars that they of their uniforms, which were designed to prevent the heads from being cut off by the Muslims' scimitars when boarding them in enemy ships. Islam and what the Barbary followers justified doing in the name of their prophet and their gods disturbed Jefferson quite deeply. America had a tradition of religious tolerance. In fact, Jefferson himself had co-authored the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedoms, but the fundamentalist Islam was like no other religion in the world he had ever seen. A religion based on supremacy, whose holy book only condemned but mandated violence against unbelievers, was unacceptable to him. The greatest fear that was someday this brand of Islam would return and pose an even greater threat to the United States. This should concern every American, that Muslims have brought about women-only classes and swimming times in America at taxpayer-funded universities and public schools, that Christians, Jews, and Hindus have been banned from serving on juries where Muslim defendants are being judged. Piggy banks and porky pig tissue dispensers have been banned from workplaces because they offend Islamic sensibilities. Ice cream has been discontinued at certain Burger King locations because the picture of the wrapper looks similar to the Arabic script of Allah. Public schools are pulling pork from their menus, on and on and on and on. It's death by 1,000 cuts, or an inch by inch as some refer to it. Most Americans have no idea that this battle is being waged every day across America, but not fighting back by allowing groups to liberate what is really happening and insisting that the Islamics adapt to our culture in the United States is cutting our own throat with a politically correct knife and helping to further the Islamic agenda. Sadly, it would appear that American leaders would rather be politically correct than victorious. If you don't remember the past, you are doomed to repeat it. Now you see churches and stuff going up in flames. And I think they're going to try and hide everything that may have to do with maybe Muslims torching these things. Or the Islamic faith. They always try to play the Islamics in a brighter light than they do other religions and cultures. They're sucking up to these people and putting America in danger. But that's why Jefferson always had the Quran handy, so that the American people would never forget what the hell happened. But that's why the Marines were always called leatherneck, because they had a leather collar around their neck so they couldn't get their head cut off. I want to thank you guys for watching. This is part of history. And just remember this stuff. Never, ever forget it. And it should be taught in the schools again if they weren't such pussies in being politically correct.